My best friend is my boyfriend's first love. The three of us went together to a small mountain village. On a rainy day, I pushed her into an air raid shelter, and a pair of male hands reached out to pull her in. Listening to her terrified screams for help, I walked away laughing. In this lifetime, enjoy your well-deserved karma. 1. After enduring countless hardships, I finally escaped from that nightmare of a mountain village and stood at the doorstep of my home, which I hadn't seen in 20 years. 20 years ago, against my parents' objections, I stubbornly followed Li Jingyang to the countryside as an educated youth for love. Once I left, I never returned. I wonder if my parents would even recognize me now. Just as I was suppressing my excitement and about to knock, the door opened, and Bai Jing and Li Jingyang walked out. One was my best friend. The other was the man I had loved for over 20 years. Bai Jing wore an expensive trench coat, her hair styled in fashionable waves, and high heels, dressed elegantly and luxuriously. At 40, she still coquettishly pouted at Li Jingyang. "It's all your fault. You insisted on going so late last night. Now we're going to be late." Li Jingyang gazed at her with eyes full of affection, his face adorned with a doting smile. Yes, it's all my fault. I'm the one to blame." This was the first time I saw tenderness and love in Li Jingyang's eyes, because whenever he looked at me, his gaze was always cold, aloof, filled with impatience and disgust. Upon seeing my aged face and tattered clothes, Bai Jing frowned in disdain. "Where did this stinking beggar come from? It reeks. What bad luck." Li Jingyang immediately showed a vicious expression and shooed me away. "Get lost. Scram right now." Weak as I was, he pushed me down without mercy. Only after seeing them lock the door and leave did I remember, this was my home. How could they act like they owned the place? After they left, I knocked on the neighbor's door, and one next door recognized me and burst into tears. Only then did I realize I had been declared dead for 17 years, with the cause of death being infidelity after marrying in the countryside. Caught in an affair, I supposedly drowned myself out of shame. My parents refused to believe it and went to the rural area where I had been sent to investigate, only to find my grave. Upon returning, my father fell gravely ill and passed away with tears streaming down his face, whispering my name. After my father's death, my mother's spirit shattered. Bai Jing came forward, claiming I had entrusted her to care for my mother before my death, and she moved into our home seamlessly. 3 months later, my mother took her own life. Bai Jing produced a will stating my mother had left her the house and all our family possessions. Li Jingyang returned to the city and married Bai Jing, living in my family home and spending the money my parents had left behind. After hearing all this, I felt icy cold all over and realized everything was Bai Jing and Li Jingyang's scheme. I had been betrayed by the two people I had treated with utmost sincerity, and because of them, my deeply loving parents had died. I left Aunt Wang's house and went to the market to buy a butcher's knife. I jumped over the courtyard wall and waited silently in the yard. When Li Jingyang and Bai Jing returned home, I rushed out and stabbed at them wildly. Even in his dying moments, Li Jingyang desperately shielded Bai Jing, but the woman he protected with his life used him as a shield against my knife, and after his death, she tried to pin everything on him. It was all Li Jingyang's idea. It had nothing to do with me. He said, "You were just a stinking toad, only fit to be our stepping stone, left to rot in that little village." My heart was filled with grief and rage, and I could bear to listen no more. With a single thrust, I plunged the knife into Bai Shui's chest. Blood splattered everywhere, yet it could not wash away the hatred burning within me. They both deserved to die, and I, who had betrayed my own parents for the sake of a man, deserved death even more. After killing them, I went to my parents' graves and took my own life to atone for my sins. Before dying, I swore with overwhelming hatred that if I could be reborn, I would make sure those who harmed me would die a miserable death. When I opened my eyes again, Bai Jing had dragged me back to the air raid shelter that changed my fate. Torrential rain poured from the sky, turning the ground muddy and hard to walk on. Bai Jing gripped my hand and shouted loudly, "Lin Nan, the rain is too heavy, let's go into the air raid shelter to take cover. Getting drenched like this will surely give us a cold tomorrow." In my past life, this was exactly how she pushed me into the air raid shelter, where the village chief's son, Li Dezhuang, was waiting for me. As she listened to my cries for help, she merely said she'd go find someone to rescue me and then ran off. After Li Dezhuang had violated me, she finally arrived belatedly with the village chief and Li Jingyang. Covered in wounds and barely clothed, I lay on the ground weeping. But Li Dezhuang insisted it was I who had seduced him. The village chief gave me two options. Either he would send me to the police station to accuse me of committing hooliganism. Another option is to marry Li Dezhuang and pretend today's incident never happened. Bai Jing advised me to marry Li Dezhuang, or else I'd be shot. I looked pleadingly at Li Jingyang, but he scolded me for being shameless and announced the end of our relationship. With no one to rely on, I was utterly despondent. Pressured by the village chief and by Jing's threats and deceit, I had no choice but to marry Li Dezhuang. In the Li family, I lived a life worse than hell. Li Dezhuang was violent by nature, and I was beaten black and blue, forced to do heavy farm work and serve the entire family, living a life worse than death. As the educated youths gradually returned to the cities, the Li family, afraid I would escape, tied me up in the pig pen. After giving birth to a daughter, they threw me into the pig pen to feed the pigs, and I wasn't released until I bore them a son. I tried to escape several times, but each time I was caught and brutally beaten. When my son grew up, he enslaved and abused me just like the rest of the Li family. Eventually, I set fire to their house, burning them all to death, and only then did I escape that small mountain village that had imprisoned me for life, now that I've been reborn. Seeing the air raid shelter that once plunged me into hell makes me tremble uncontrollably, yet Bai Jing is already pushing me inside. Lin Nan, don't just stand there, hurry inside. I snapped out of it, using all my strength to push Bai Jing into the air raid shelter, saying to her, "You go inside first to take shelter from the rain, I'll go back to the village to get raincoats and come back for you. Help, let me go." "You've got the wrong person." Bai Jing was caught off guard as I pushed her into the air raid shelter, screaming for help. Without looking back, I ran toward the village. I laughed loudly as I ran. I had been reborn, and this time, I would send all those who harmed me straight to hell. After the initial joy, I began to ponder, how should I take revenge? Li Dezhuang's father was the village chief. In this remote mountain hollow, the village chief was practically a local tyrant, and the Li family had many relatives. Bringing him down wouldn't be easy, but for someone like me, reborn with foresight, it wasn't impossible. Production team leader Wang Fugue was an ambitious man with connections both in the commune and the county. However, due to village chief Li's seniority, he had to remain subordinate, though he never accepted it willingly. In my previous life, 3 years later, he seized an opportunity to oust village chief Li and became the village chief of Fuqiang village himself. Now, I'm giving him a chance to become village chief. Earlier, I first ran to Wang Fugue's house and told him that someone was hiding in the air raid shelter harassing female educated youths, and that person seemed to be village chief Li's son, Li Dezhuang. Upon hearing this, Wang Fugue's eyes lit up. Just as I had expected, he immediately gathered some men and headed to the air raid shelter to catch the culprit. After finding Wang Fugue, I ran back to the educated youth point to call for help. Li Jingyang froze when he saw me return and blurted out, "Why are you back?" I knew immediately that he was also involved in this conspiracy. A chill ran through my heart. My past self must have been blind to fall for this wolf in sheep's clothing. Li Jingyang came from a poor family background, with many siblings. As the second child, he was the least favored and often went hungry. It was I who took pity on him, bringing him food every day so he wouldn't starve. Back then, I only felt sympathy for him. After graduating from junior high, his parents forced him to quit school and become a carpenter. Li Jingyang ran to my house crying and said to me, "Lin Nan, please help me. If I don't study, my life will be ruined." The boy's overwhelming sense of despair made my heart ache instantly. I ran to beg my parents to fund Li Jingyang's education. When they refused, I went on a hunger strike until they reluctantly agreed to pay his tuition. At first, Li Jingyang was grateful to me, but after entering high school and meeting the delicate Bai Shui, his attitude changed. He became cold and dismissive toward me, constantly belittling and criticizing me until I gradually lost confidence and became timid around him. To keep him happy, I followed him around like a servant. When he complained about being mocked by classmates for not having nice clothes, I asked my parents for money to buy him the trendiest outfits. He said a grown man without money in his pocket has no dignity, so I gave him all my monthly allowance. He said Bai Shui was his sworn sister, and as his wife, I should take care of her, so I treated Bai Shui like my own sister, and from then on, I had one more person to support. When the policy of sending youths to the countryside was announced, the Li family pushed Li Jingyang to go, and Bai Shui's family did the same with her. As an only child, my parents had even secured a job for me, so I didn't have to go to the countryside. But when Li Jingyang simply said he didn't want to be separated from me, I followed him to the countryside without hesitation, continuing to serve as his maid in this small mountain village. He claimed he couldn't handle farm work, so I worked myself to the bone to earn work points for him. My parents, heartbroken for me, sent money and food coupons every month. Li Jingyang demanded I hand over all the money and goods, claiming it was for my own good, that he was afraid I'd be taken advantage of if I had money. And so, for 3 years in the countryside, everything my family sent was taken by him and spent with Bai Shui. But these two wretched creatures showed no gratitude. Instead, they pushed me into hell, trampled over my corpse to inherit my family's wealth, and lived comfortably off it. Reborn in this life, the foolishness in my head is gone. Now, when I see Li Jingyang, all I feel is overwhelming hatred. Li Jingyang saw that I didn't answer but only glared at him with hatred, a flicker of panic flashing in his eyes as he asked guiltily, "Where's Bai Shui? Why didn't she come back with you?" I wiped the rainwater from my face and said coldly, "She was dragged into the air raid shelter by someone." Li Jingyang's face changed dramatically as he angrily asked me, "What did you say? Shouldn't it be you who?" My expression darkened as I asked coldly, "What should I be?" realizing he had slipped up. Li Jingyang quickly fell silent, worried about Bai Shui's safety. He rushed into the pouring rain. Watching his retreating figure, I felt a chill in my heart. See how obvious love and indifference are. In my past life, when I was ruined by Li Dezhuang, Li Jingyang only cursed me for being shameless, but hearing Bai Shui was in danger, look how frantic he is, as if his mother had died. This matter can't rely solely on Wang Fugui. I want to ruin Bai Shui's reputation, leaving her no chance to recover. I ran to the male-educated youth's dormitory and shouted loudly, "Team Leader Chen, someone has dragged Bai Shui into the air raid shelter. Go save her quickly." Team Leader Chen, named Qin Zifeng, was authoritative and capable. Rumor had it his family had powerful connections, so even the usually domineering village chief Li treated him with respect. When I first arrived in the countryside, Li Dezhuang took notice of me because of my looks. He harassed me twice, but Qin Zifeng drove him away both times. Later, Qin Zifeng went to find village chief Li. I don't know what he said to him, but from then on, Li Dezhuang never dared to harass me again. On the day I married Li Dezhuang, Qin Zifeng came to see me and asked if I was being forced. At that time, I was like a walking corpse, just numbly shaking my head. He left angrily, and I was left in tears. Qin Zifeng soon joined the army and left Xinghua village. Before leaving, he came to see me again and left an address, telling me I could write to him if I was in trouble, but that address was snatched and torn up by Li Dezhuang, and I completely lost contact with Qin Zifeng. After being locked in the pigpen by the Li family, I regretted every day why I hadn't told Qin Zifeng the truth. That was my only chance to escape hell. Seeing Qin Zifeng again, I felt like a wrong child, tears streaming uncontrollably down my face. Qin Zifeng noticed I was soaked and shivering, handing me his clothes. "Put these on quickly, don't catch a cold." His heartwarming concern made me sob uncontrollably. Thinking I was frightened, Qin Zifeng comforted me softly, "Don't be afraid, I'm here. Stay at the educated youth point, I'll go save them." Turning around, Qin Zifeng loudly commanded the male-educated youths at the point, "Everyone, follow me, let's go save them." Not wanting to miss the excitement, I insisted on going along. Qin Zifeng draped his raincoat over me, and I ran with the male-educated youths to the air raid shelter. When we arrived, Wang Fugui happened to show up with his men as well. He had brought the village militia, determined to beat village chief Li to death. Everyone rushed into the air raid shelter together and saw Li Dezhuang, completely naked, wrestling with Li Jingyang. Lying on the ground was Shui Bai, her face covered in blood and her body covered in wounds. Torn clothes were scattered around her, evidence of Li Dezhuang's brutality. She seemed to have been severely abused and appeared unconscious, lying there naked and motionless, showing no reaction to the surrounding fight. Village chief Li stood nearby with a few of his relatives. Watching the spectacle, he was loudly cursing Li Jingyang, "You little brat, how dare you hit my son? This is outrageous." Village chief Li snarled at his son with a commanding tone, "Dezhuang, beat him to death. If he dies, throw him into the mountains to feed the wolves." Several of the Li family relatives stood by, cheering them on. "A stinking educated youth with bad class background dares to act arrogant on our turf. Beat him to death." Qin Zifeng rushed into the air raid shelter and kicked Li Dezhuang flying, saving Li Jingyang who was half beaten to death. I took off my raincoat and draped it over Bai Shui. The rain was icy cold. Bai Shui woke from unconsciousness, covering her face and screaming in terror, "No, don't hit me, I'll go back right now and trick Chen Nan into coming for you to play with." I pretended to be grief-stricken and shouted at Bai Shui, "Bai Shui, no wonder you insisted on dragging me into the air raid shelter. You were trying to harm me, weren't you? What's happening to you now is your own fault. You're just desserts." After saying this, I snatched the raincoat away. Hearing my voice, Bai Shui snapped out of her daze and, seeing the shelter full of men, suddenly remembered she was still naked. She screamed in terror and lunged for the raincoat. I didn't give her what she wanted. Instead, I threw the raincoat far away. Watching as Bai Jing curled up, hugging herself, crying loudly in shame, just as wretched as I had been in my past life. The only difference was that she still had Li Jingyang, even after being beaten half to death by Li Dezhuang. Li Jingyang struggled to crawl to Bai Shui's side, taking off his clothes to wrap around her. Bai Shui threw herself into his arms, crying as she accused, "It was Lin Nan who harmed me, she pushed me in here." Li Jingyang held her tightly, his heart aching. then glared at me and shouted sharply, "Lin Nan, you're despicable, how dare you harm Bai Shui? I'll never forgive you for the rest of my life." This scene only made me want to sneer. "Li Jingyang, are you deaf or blind, or are you pretending to be ignorant? Didn't you hear what Bai Shui said, or were you conspiring with her to harm me? Li Jingyang, has your conscience been eaten by dogs? No, even dogs know how to protect their masters. You've eaten my food and drunk my wine. Yet you turn around to harm me. You're worse than pigs and dogs, a complete beast. Return all the money I've spent on you and the work points I helped you earn over the years. I want to break up." Li Jingyang didn't expect me to scold him. When he heard me say break up, his face turned ashen, and he glared at me viciously, squeezing out a sentence through clenched teeth. "Fine, don't come begging me later. I've never spent your money, so don't think you can extort me. You were the one who shamelessly volunteered to help me. I never forced you, even though I had long known how heartless he was and felt no lingering attachment to him." Hearing his shameless words still made me tremble with rage. I raised my hand and slapped him hard across the face. Li Jingyang was stunned for a moment by the blow, then flew into a rage and tried to hit me back, but Qin Zifeng kicked him to the ground, and he didn't dare move again. All the educated youth at the settlement heard Bai Shui's words, and upon hearing Li Jingyang's shameless remarks, everyone was shocked by his audacity. Looking at him with contempt, Qin Zifeng gazed deeply at Li Jingyang and sternly commanded, "Debts must be repaid. If you don't want to be driven out of the educated youth settlement, return Lin Jiqing's money honestly." Over there, village chief Li, frightened by the arrival of so many people, just like in his previous life, began shouting angrily at Bai Shui. "Bai Jiqing, you shamelessly seduced my son and conspired with Li Jingyang to set up a honey trap, threatening me for a worker-peasant-soldier university quota. How can we revolutionary masses be threatened by scoundrels? Someone, arrest them and interrogate them thoroughly. Such bad elements must be crushed and never allowed to rise again." I sneered inwardly. Village chief Li truly lived up to his reputation as a cunning old fox, even in this situation. He could still pin such accusations on Bai Shui and Li Jingyang, turning Li Dezhuang into the victim. If Wang Fugui hadn't been present, Bai Shui and Li Jingyang wouldn't just face charges of hooliganism but also persecution of revolutionary masses. They'd never be able to turn their lives around, but this suited my purposes perfectly, saving me the trouble of dealing with Li Jingyang myself. Unfortunately, how could Wang Fugui let go of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Only by crushing Li Dezhuang could he become the village chief. Wang Fugui loudly ordered the militia behind him. Li Dezhuang raped a female educated youth, and Chief Li intends to kill indiscriminately. Arrest them all. Qin Zifeng raised his arm and rallied the educated youths. Village Chief Li colluded with his son to harm the educated youth. Let's report him to the educated youth office. Village Chief Li was so terrified his legs went weak. His relatives, fearing they might be implicated, hastily distanced themselves. "This has nothing to do with us. Village Chief Li asked us to come watch the show. We don't know anything." Amid the chaos, Li Jingyang quickly coordinated his story with Bai Shui, instructing her to firmly insist that Li Dezhuang had raped her. Snow White had no choice. She didn't want to marry Li Dezhuang, nor did she want to be convicted of hooliganism, and she certainly couldn't reveal the plot against me. This was the only thing she could say. Village Chief Li cursed loudly and tried to assert his authority as the village head. Unfortunately, with both witnesses and material evidence present, he had no way to deny it. During the police interrogation, Li Dezhuang and Village Chief Li insisted that Snow White and Li Jingyang had plotted against me to secure a spot at the Worker-Peasant-Soldier University. Since Snow White was the victim and the Educated Youth Office got involved, the matter blew up too much for anyone to believe their claims. Everyone thought they were just trying to evade punishment, allowing the two of them to narrowly escape legal consequences. Li Dezhuang was sentenced to death, Village Chief Li was sentenced to 6 years for harboring and condoning crimes, and Wang Fugui successfully became the new village chief. Although Bai Shui was not sentenced, her fate was worse than imprisonment. Her once proud face was disfigured, her nasal bridge, brow bone, and jaw were all fractured, leaving half her face collapsed and horrifically deformed. Li Dezhuang resented her for failing to deceive me into his hands and subjected her to brutal abuse. Her uterus was severely damaged, requiring removal. Disfigured and barren, Bai Shui became paranoid, violent, and desperate, forcing Li Jingyang to marry her. Yet Li Jingyang, who had once been madly in love with her, fled back to the educated youth camp overnight after seeing her terrifying disfigurement and learning she could no longer bear children. But his days at the educated youth outpost weren't easy either. After learning of his despicable behavior, everyone collectively isolated him, no one spoke to him, and he wasn't allowed to eat with the group. Qin Zifeng assigned him the hardest and dirtiest tasks when distributing work. Yet all the work points were credited to me. If Li Jingyang dared to complain even slightly, Chen Zifeng would beat him up, leaving him battered and bruised. After a few rounds of this, Li Jingyang stopped daring to speak up. He worked obediently, but since no one would share meals with him, he had to gather firewood and cook after exhausting labor. Within days, he became as thin as a rail. Li Jingyang couldn't take it anymore and wanted to reconcile with me again, yet he didn't want others to see him begging for reconciliation. So he waited for a time when I was alone at the outpost to approach me, putting on a deeply affectionate act. Lin Nan, let's make up. I was fooled by Bai Shui before, but now I realize it's you I truly love. Once we return to the city, we'll get married, and I'll treat you well for the rest of my life. I looked at him with a cold smile. You don't regret breaking up with me, you regret losing your blood bag to leech off. Struggling without me doing your work. Making up means you won't have to repay the money, can keep spending mine, and have me work for you again. Li Jingyang, how dare you think I'd pick up your trash? Do you dare to curse me? Li Jingyang, having his thoughts exposed by me, flew into a rage out of humiliation and slapped me across the face. I didn't dodge, taking the blow head-on. The force of the slap knocked me sideways, and 5 bright red finger marks quickly appeared on my cheek. Li Jingyang regretted it immediately after hitting me. He had come to seek reconciliation. How had he ended up resorting to violence? Li Jingyang, afraid that I wouldn't reconcile with him, hurriedly apologized to me. Lin Nan, I'm sorry, hit me to vent your anger. As he spoke, he reached out to grab my hand, wanting me to slap him to release my frustration. He thought I couldn't bear to hit him and was just putting on a show. But he didn't expect me to raise my foot and kick him hard in a crucial spot. I used all my strength in that kick. I wanted to make sure he'd never have children. Li Jingyang let out a sharp cry and collapsed to the ground, clutching his crotch and curling up like a shrimp. I quickly tore open my clothes, messed up my hair, and scratched my neck hard, leaving a red mark on my fair skin, under Li Jingyang's stunned gaze. I screamed for help and ran outside. Li Jingyang panicked. Realizing what I was about to do, he grabbed my leg despite the pain and pleaded, Lin Nan, spare me. I stared into Li Jingyang's eyes and, under his desperate gaze, continued shouting in a shrill, piercing voice, help, help. Chen Zifeng's sharp figure rushed into the courtyard with a gust of wind, followed closely by the male-educated youths who had just finished work. Seeing me disheveled, with a bright red slap mark on my face, my clothes torn open, and 2 distinct scratch marks on my neck. Li Jingyang was gripping my leg as I struggled in terror, tears streaming down my face while screaming for help. Chen Zifeng's eyes turned red with fury. He kicked Li Jingyang away and swiftly took off his own coat to wrap around me. Li Jingyang was kicked away like a mangy dog, with 3 broken ribs, spitting blood from his mouth, lying there unable to move, tears streaming down my face, clutching my collar. I trembled uncontrollably as I cried, sob. Li Jingyang wanted to get back together with me, and when I refused, he tried to force himself on me. After hearing my words, Chen Zifeng became like an enraged lion, punching and kicking Li Jingyang relentlessly. If it weren't for the other male-educated youths holding him back, Li Jingyang would have been beaten to death. Li Jingyang spat blood while crying injustice, but he was in the female-educated youth's room clutching my leg. And I was in that state. Who would believe him when he said he hadn't intended to do anything wrong? In those days, the crime of hooliganism was already severely punished, and matters involving educated youth were taken even more seriously by higher authorities. Li Jingyang was sentenced to death as a result of the harsher penalty. I felt not a shred of guilt. In my past life, Li Jingyang had caused the death of my entire family. Him dying just once was letting him off easy. Li Jingyang wrote to me from prison, recalling all the kindness I had shown him. He said I was his salvation and begged me to forgive him and save him, promising to repay me for the rest of his life. I read it with a cold smile, then tossed the letter into the stove and watched it turn to ashes. Unexpectedly, before his execution, Li Jingyang insisted on seeing me. I refused. I heard that on the day of his execution, he was so terrified he wet his pants and had to be dragged to the execution ground, screaming all the way, "This isn't how it's supposed to be. Lin Nan should have been the one in the bomb shelter. Bai Shui and I were supposed to step over Lin Nan and live happily ever after, inheriting her family's fortune." I laughed when I heard this. It seems Li Jingyang had also been reborn. He thought he could manipulate my fate like he did in our past life. Too bad I'm no longer the love-struck fool from before. Now, he'll pay for his sins across 2 lifetimes and face my punishment. Half a month later, Bai Shui was discharged from the hospital and returned to the educated youth settlement. Upon hearing the news that Li Jingyang had been executed by firing squad, she laughed so hard that tears and snot streamed down her face. Twisting her already disfigured features into something even more grotesque, she screamed that he deserved it. That it was karma. After laughing and cursing her fill, she glared at me with pure malice. grabbed a kitchen knife, and lunged at me. Lin Nan, why couldn't you just obediently go into the air raid shelter? Why couldn't you just obediently become Li Dazhuang's wife? You ruined my face, you made me unable to bear children, you cost me my chance at worker peasant soldier university. Just die. I had been prepared for her, knowing Bai Shui would return. I had hidden a fire poker by my bed, while she was laughing. I had already grabbed it, as she raised the knife to strike. My poker struck her wrist first. This strike carried the hatred of 2 lifetimes, actually breaking Bai Shui's wrist. Bai Shui howled in pain while clutching her wrist, still trying to attack me, using her uninjured hand to pick up the kitchen knife from the ground. Seeing the 3 women rushing in from outside, I put down the fire poker in my hand. All those who harmed me in my past life were now gathered. I only needed to sit back and watch them fight. Bai Shui picked up the knife and, seeing me smiling at her, flew into a rage. What are you laughing at? I pointed behind her. Before Bai Shui could turn around, she heard a curse. Bai Shui, you little slut, you killed my son, I'll take your life. Li Dazhuang's mother charged into the house with her 3 daughters, viciously grabbing Bai Shui's hair from behind and dragging her to the ground. Li Dazhuang's 3 sisters pounced on Bai Shui like tigresses, pinning her down and scratching her face. Alone. Bai Shui was no match for the mother and her 4 daughters. Just as I had been powerless against them in my past life, Bai Shui had always been unpopular, lazy, sharp-tongued, and looking down on the other female educated youths. She clung only to Li Jingyang, and everyone had long disliked her. After learning she and Li Jingyang had plotted against me, they despised her even more, seeing her being beaten. Everyone at the educated youth outpost stood by watching the spectacle. With no one coming to help, Bai Shui, beaten severely, grabbed a kitchen knife from the ground and swung it wildly, injuring Li Dazhuang's 3 sisters to varying degrees, who fled in terror. But the educated youth outpost was only so big, and when they came, fearing Bai Shui might escape, they had bolted the door from the inside. They tried to run into the female educated youth's room for shelter, but I bolted the door from the inside, preventing them from entering. Bai Shui, wielding the kitchen knife, slashed them until they were covered in wounds and collapsed in a pool of blood. Li Dazhuang's mother was so terrified that she knelt on the ground begging for mercy. I stared at her. This was the same woman who had come up with the wicked idea in my past life to have Li Dazhuang tie me up in the pig pen. When my parents came looking for me, she knocked me unconscious, gagged me, and covered me with pig feed, lying to my parents that I was already dead. She even took them to see a fake grave, personally cutting off my path home. I watched as Shui hacked at her head with a knife, blow after blow, feeling nothing but vindication. Li Dazhuang's mother gradually fell silent, lying on the ground like a dead pig, her face mangled beyond recognition by Shui's strikes, a gruesome death. Wang Fugui arrived with the militia, wresting the knife from Shui's hands and pinning her to the ground. As Shui lay there, she spotted me inside the house and struggled desperately. Let me go. I'm going to kill Lin Nan. I opened the door and stepped out, looking down at the disheveled Bai Shui, coldly asking her, I treated you so well, why did you betray me? Bai Shui spat out the blood from her mouth, staring at me with madness in her eyes. Bah, you're just a cheap slut who throws herself at men. You're sucking up to me because you're afraid Li Jingyang won't want you. It's because of you that Jingyang and I can't openly be together. You wretched woman only deserve to marry that ugly brute Li Dazhuang and rot away in this godforsaken mountain village for the rest of your life. I only felt a chill run down my spine, so this was the reason they had harmed me. But if you wanted to be together, you could have just said so. I would have stepped aside. It's not like I was clinging desperately to Li Jingyang. Gasps of shock rippled through the crowd. It was the first time anyone had witnessed someone so shamelessly vicious. Qin Zifeng stood at the center of the onlookers, his heart aching as he looked at me. I lifted my head to meet his concerned gaze and offered him a relieved smile. It's all in the past now. Those who harmed me have gotten their retribution. I'm preparing to return to the city, back to my parents' side, to take good care of them and fulfill my filial duties. Bai Shui killed 1 person and severely injured 3 others, transforming from a victim into a murderer, causing a sensation at the time. There was no doubt about her death sentence. I went to watch the spectacle during her public trial. I saw Bai Shui being brought up for trial with a large sign bearing a red cross hanging around her neck. The sign read murderer, just like Li Jingyang. She was so terrified she wet herself and couldn't stand, collapsing to the ground as she listened to the verdict before being dragged away to be executed by firing squad. With my vengeance fulfilled, my guilt toward my parents made me miss them even more. I wished I could grow wings and fly to their side immediately, but as an educated youth, I couldn't return without an official quota assignment. All I could do was endure the longing and write them letters. I actively sought opportunities to return, knowing that the college entrance exams would resume the following year. I went to the city's waste recycling station to buy many books and began studying desperately. If I could get into university, I would be able to return to my parents' side, but before the exams resumed, I got the chance to go back to the city. One Fugue called me to the village office and gave me the worker-peasant-soldier quota, saying it was to thank me for helping rid the village of pests. I didn't refuse. Eager to leave this impoverished mountain village that had trapped me for what felt like a lifetime, before leaving, I went to find Chinzafeng and gave him all the books I had bought from the waste recycling station, saying only one thing: the college entrance exams will be restored sooner or later, and it won't be long. I'm leaving these books for you. I hope they'll help. He took the books, gazing at me with deep-set eyes, his intense stare making my heart race. Then he smiled, his voice low. "Wait for me," I nodded and replied, "Okay." Neither of us spoke of love, yet silence spoke louder than words. In each other's hearts, we had already found our place. Boarding the train, my heart leaped with joy. Soon I would see my parents again. I didn't even dare close my eyes, afraid this might just be a fleeting dream. As the train pulled into the station, my feet touched the path home, and my steps quickened as if wounded by springs. Stepping out of the station, I spotted my parents in the crowd at once. I dashed to them and hugged them tightly, weeping uncontrollably, seeing how dark and thin I'd become. They also burst into tears. "We told you not to go to the countryside, but you insisted. Look how much you've suffered." I smiled and shook my head. "No, I'm fine." My parents took me to a restaurant and ordered a table full of meat dishes. They didn't eat much themselves, just kept putting food on my plate. Wishing they could fatten me up instantly, being back with my parents again, feeling their intense love, I happily acted spoiled with them, laughing joyfully like a child. I had returned, and the parents whose children were still in the countryside were all envious, coming one after another to ask how to get admission quotas for the worker-peasant-soldier university. Among them were Li Jingyang's parents, who still didn't know about his execution, acting with the air of future in-laws. They arrogantly questioned me. "Lin Nan, you're so selfish. You had a spot at the worker-peasant-soldier university but didn't give it to Jingyang, choosing to come back first. Is this how a girlfriend should behave?" I laughed and said loudly in front of everyone, "Li Jingyang was executed for committing hooliganism. What use would he have for a spot now? In my past life, Li Jingyang leeched off me, and his whole family took advantage of my parents just because I liked him. Those two old things were wicked and obsessed with saving face. Now that their family had produced a criminal, and one convicted of hooliganism at that, they could forget about ever holding their heads high again." Under the scornful gazes and whispers of the crowd, Li Jingyang's parents slunk away in disgrace. After spending 2 days with my parents, I reported to the worker-peasant-soldier university. Many boys pursued me, but I told them I already had a boyfriend to discourage them. I devoted all my time to studying, although neither Chinzafeng nor I ever brought up the topic of dating. In my heart, I had already chosen him. I wrote letters to encourage him, waiting for the day he would pass the college entrance exams so we could meet again. The letter was sent out but returned. He was no longer in that small mountain village. It suddenly occurred to me that in my past life, around the same time, he had left to join the army. I was heartbroken. In my past life, the address he gave me was snatched away by Li Dezhuang, and in this life, he enlisted before he could even give me his address. I regretted not telling him how I felt, missing him twice in 2 lifetimes. The gatekeeper came to find me, saying someone was here to see me. I followed him out of the school gate and saw that tall, straight figure standing under the tree. In an instant, my sorrow vanished. Chinzafeng, dressed in military uniform, strode toward me with a smile brighter than sunshine. "Lin Nan, will you marry me and become a proud military spouse?" I nodded with a smile. "I do. In this lifetime, I will fiercely embrace happiness and love all those who love me."